This is Audiogyan, and I am your host, Kedar Nimkar. Welcome to a deep dive into the minds of luminaries from the Indian creative world. Today we have Rajni Bakshi with us on Audiogyan. She's an Indian author, researcher, and activist. Her work primarily focuses on issues related to nonviolence, economics, ecology, and peace. Rajni is the founder and curator of Ahimsa Conversations, an online platform for exploring the possibilities of nonviolence. More about her in the show notes. I've been to Vipassana a couple of times and found that peace is an outcome of war. And that made me curious to have conversations with Rajni on understanding the design of peace. A small note before we start that these are complex subjects of lifetime. And obviously, I'm very, very naive to this. But Rajni and I had a conversation before the recording that we are all exploring the right questions for the answers around us. On that note, welcome, Rajni, to Audiogyan. It's a real honor to have you on the show.
Thank you, Kedar. It's an honor to be here, and thank you so much for including me in this series.
Superb. Yeah, so I'm short of words. The privilege to talk to you, and I've come up with few questions mainly to understand. And this podcast is generally about design, so I thought we can go philosophical on what is design of peace. And
Sure.
I wanted to start off by like a basic or more of a context setting question as to what does non-violence or ahimsa mean to you, and also tell us a little bit about ahimsa conversations, how and where did it start.
Yes.
Yeah.
So maybe Kedar will start with the basics, which is the World Health Organization has a definition. So maybe we'll just, and I'm not saying that we should take it as final or the last word or anything, but it's a good starting point for our purpose. And as you said, this whole conversation is premised on recognizing that we are all exploring, at least the two of us are in this as an exploratory and reflective exercise rather than claiming to have any definitive and final answers, right? So I thought this is a good place to start. So the World Health Organization says violence is the intentional use of physical force or power, threatened or actual, against oneself or against a group or community that either results in or has a high likelihood of resulting in injury, death, psychological harm, maldevelopment, or deprivation.
Wow. That's quite an elaborate one.
Yeah. And I'm sure that, they must have worked on this for a very long time before coming to this understanding. So this is, I've used this in a booklet that I published. So
Yeah.
I quoted from this over there. But now, in this context, shall we jump straight into asking what is ahimsa then?
Yes, please. Yeah.
So, again, there are as many answers to that question as there are people interested in the concept. So, let's keep that in front. In fact, saying what ahimsa is far more complicated than agreeing on what is violence. But here is a broad agreement. There is broad agreement on the following. And when I say agreement, it is among people who are engaged with the ideal, who are committed to the concept, who have been working with it in very practical and real life, real term, ways. One is that ahimsa is not the absence of violence, either physical or verbal. So mere absence of physical or verbal violence is not ahimsa.
Okay.
Secondly, that ahimsa is much more than not killing and not injuring. I mean, this second is really an elaboration of the first.
Correct.
Three, that ahimsa is the positive energy that is released when we overcome the desire to harm someone.
So it's much more subtle.
Yeah. Four, that ahimsa is the process of working to overcome destructive emotions like fear, anger, hatred.
Hmm.
And in its highest form, ahimsa is the presence of love in action.
Hmm. Hmm.
Mm,
Interesting. Does it sort of point to, as in, I have this, whatever, like, you don't look at the finger but where it is pointing to. So is it pointing to sort of complete self restraint and then just giving out love? Is that an
So
understanding?
in its highest form, yes. And
Hmm.
if you like, maybe a little later in our talk, we can go into that in more detail. Because I am the most common opposition that I am confronted with.
Hmm.
When people say, "Oh, I cannot believe in nonviolence because it means turning the other cheek, and that just means that you will end up being oppressed by whoever has more power," and that is a very real concern. That's a very legitimate concern.
Hmm.
I'm not taking that criticism lightly at all. But I suggest that we hold this concern, like, put it on, put it on the side of the screen for a moment
Hmm.
and look at something much more elementary and more important to put, uh, in the forefront, which is violence more natural to human beings than non-violence? What is your understanding? Do
I
you think,
think.
you see, a lot of people say that violence is a more basic instinct of the species
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
non-violence is a learned behavior? What is your understanding?
Even I think so, but the whole, so where I come from at least is that the very nature of us being evolving as human species. I mean, we lost, if we follow the Darwinian school, if we lost the tail, it was for some higher cause. Now, if you have developed a brain, it's definitely for some higher cause. And if you are creating these imaginary layers of social structures, religion, and lot many layers, then it's definitely for something higher than the primitive instinct, which is violence. Which is one of it is violence. So my
Yeah.
take is, yeah, it's natural, but the whole idea is to restrain it or control it through different structures.
Okay. Yeah. So this is a broadly held understanding, correct?
Hmm, hmm,
Now, fascinating thing is that in Gandhi's time, since Gandhiji is such an important landmark, right, in the human exploration of nonviolence,
yeah,
I hope that, or maybe I should say it very clearly, that nonviolence neither began nor ended with Gandhi.
hmm,
So in case many of your listeners are of the impression that Gandhi somehow invented nonviolence, yes, he does have a epochal role in putting it into practice in political struggle.
hmm,
And in our times, in this age that we are living in now, his role in that sphere is seminal. But the striving for nonviolence is ancient, and we can go into that later. But what I wanted to focus on at this point was that in Gandhi's time, to say that nonviolence is as old as the hills was really quite, remarkable. And he used to say that all the time, right? You know that, right? He would keep saying, "I'm not doing anything new. Nonviolence is as old as the hills."
hmm,
Because why it was remarkable? Because at that time the dominant idea, which was coming from Hobbes, this whole European legacy
hmm,
of life is short, nasty, and brutish, evolution is the survival of the fittest, and fittest was misunderstood as more brawn, more muscle, more ability to be aggressive, right? All this was. So we were in the grip of what was known as the killer ape theory.
Okay.
This was a dominant idea. And this basically the killer ape theory, and my apologies to any experts who are listening. I'm giving a very, what I call Amar Chitra Katha version here. In a completely, or in the Western lexicon, you will say the for dummies version of this is that it was argued that those apes which were more capable of aggression and effective aggression evolved into Homo sapiens. Because this was a question, huh? Why did some apes remain apes? Why did the Neanderthals die out? Why did sapiens survive? I mean, these are questions that are all still being looked into.
Yeah.
But at that point, that aggression and the ability to basically go to war for what you need or what you want was the defining characteristic, we were told. But in the last 60, 70 years, there is a whole range of multidisciplinary research which has pretty much shown that this is not true. Of course, the instinct for aggression has always been important. See, if we didn't know how to protect ourselves, say, by we, I mean our ancestors, say 200,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Before language, before, fire would have been around, but I mean, long before anything by way of, recorded history. Of course, aggression was an important part of our makeup, but it may not have been the key element that enabled the sapien to become what we are today. And I'll quote to you from the Dutch primatologist and ethologist Frans de Waal, that is Fransdewaal. I spelled it out in case I'm doing any injustice to the pronunciation of his name. He says we know a great deal about the causes of hostile behavior in both animals and humans, ranging from hormones and brain activity to cultural influences. Yet we know little of the way conflicts are avoided, or how, when they do occur, relationships are afterward repaired and normalized. As a result, people tend to believe that violence is more integral to human nature than peace.
Yeah. So I may not be I'm definitely not a subject expert or gone deep into researching these pieces, but somehow at a very superficial level also it feels that people who have shown more compassion and love have stood larger in the timeline from Buddha to Gandhi. So definitely violence may not be the core characteristic. It sounds very obvious, but yeah, that's where the research is required, right?
Correct.
How
I mean,
obvious or how not obvious it is.
Because if you take, say, for example, a Genghis Khan or an Attila the Hun, yes, they are known today. We know their names, we know what they are famous for, but they don't in any way influence our life today.
Yep.
Whereas what the Buddha explored, or what Ashoka learned from his mistakes. Should I tell the story of King Ashoka on the assumption that everybody who listens to this may not know the story?
Yes, please.
So I think Ashoka is 3rd century BC. He appears a few years after Alexander. He's just very soon after Alexander comes to India. He is from the Mauryan dynasty. And like a lot of kings in the ancient world, he goes about conquering and making wars. And in one case, in a place called Kalinga, which would be roughly present day Orissa, he has a war of conquest, which is so horrific. It is so brutal the killing happens on a scale so large that even he is shaken by it. And something inside him changes. And I'm quoting here from Nayanjot Lahiri, who has appeared in Ahimsa Conversations. So anybody who wants to can go and listen to her conversation. She says that such a deep transformation happened in this man that he snatched defeat from the jaws of victory. He wins the war, okay, and then he says, God, I am so defeated. And that then leads to a transformation. He becomes a devout Buddhist, and he preaches then the message of compassion and nonviolence and many other values. And that is primarily why when we were looking for symbols for modern India, the leaders of the freedom struggle went back to Ashokan India. So the Ashoka Chakra, the lions, which appear on our currency notes, they are our national, they're important emblem. They are all from the Ashoka's time. And of course, now today there is an allegation by some people that this is what made India weak. And again, Nayanjot Lahiri deals with that in her Ahimsa Conversation. And if you like, we can talk about that later. So there are these examples. And so to go back to where we deviated, see, Ashoka is known. I mean, there's an Ashoka Fellowship, a global program called, Everyone a Change Maker, which was created by an American. But he called it the Ashoka Fellowship. You don't have a Genghis Khan Fellowship.
Yeah. Or Alexander Fellowship also.
That's true. Though somehow, that's true. That was also true. More importantly, you don't have a Hitler Fellowship and you don't have a Pol Pot scholarship, as far as we know. I mean, I hope that is the case.
Yeah. Interesting. So how did you sort of venture into this sort of zone of understanding or inquiry?
Thank you. Yeah, that's a very basic and important, I think, entry point to this whole exploration, to tell my story. So I started out as a journalist in 1980. That's when I came out of college. And very soon I got involved with a whole range of activist efforts in India. So this is through the 80s and 90s. And a lot of these groups and networks were saying that what we call development is actually a very destructive process. And it is creating progress for some people at the cost of other people. And the cost was in the form of displacement, either bodily displacement of your home and your land becoming inaccessible to you because it's needed for submergence zone of a dam or for a mine or something. But that you are often, even if you're not removed from your land and your home, your traditional livelihood goes and you don't get a replacement livelihood. All of that, many things. Also, the ecological damage, not because these groups and networks were saying that, oh, you have to leave nature untouched. There's no such thing as nature untouched. Human beings our ancestors have been playing around with nature and changing its shape and form from long before, we could talk to each other. So that was not the criteria. But the issue that we were raising long before the term sustainable development came into the global
vocabulary, actually.
Vocabulary and became a buzzword, was that what we call development in the late 20th century cannot be sustained. The planet has neither the resources nor the sinks. See, because remember that the Club of Rome report has happened in the early 70s. A Small is Beautiful has been written in the 70s.
Oh, I think it should have been long ago in India also, right? If I'm reading it correctly, like more decentralized, more sort of sustainable.
So that is what in the 80s, what a lot of these groups and networks were doing was discovering that all their concerns Gandhi had actually in some way anticipated. Not entirely, of course, because there were completely new things happening. But the fundamental point that, and he said it in the 40s, when the Western lifestyle was a fraction of what it became by the 80s and 90s. He said that if the whole world starts living like the West lives, we need more than 3 planets.
Wow.
One planet Earth cannot sustain every human being living like that. So there is this issue of knowing how much your ecosystem can sustain. And so long before I learned the term structural violence, I was writing about groups and efforts that were, trying to counter it. Then, of course, much later, I think it may have been in the 90s, that then we began to use this term structural violence. So that was happening. And of course, through this whole process of following the work of so many different groups and networks, I kept running into Gandhi. Not as, the person whom you could quibble with about minute details of how the freedom struggle should have been run or should not have been run, but the Gandhi with the civilizational vision. So I began to, and in this I was deeply influenced by, Professor Ashish Nandi, Shiv Vishwanathan, many such friends, Vijay Pratap of Lokayan. With their influence, I began to make a distinction between the historical Gandhi, who is a person born on a certain date, killed on a certain date, and he did ABCD actions over those, 79 years. But I felt that what is now really important is the civilization of Gandhi. The Gandhi who had an understanding of and a vision of what human civilization has the potential to be and what is holding us back. To the extent that in Hind Swaraj, which is a booklet that he wrote in 1909, he argues that what the West calls civilization is not civilization at all. There's a famous, it's treated as a joke, but it actually happened. He was asked by a reporter in London on one of his trips there for the negotiations, Mr. Gandhi, what do you think of Western civilization? People say this, but actually the reporter asked Mr. Gandhi, what do you think of modern civilization? Unfortunately, most people change it to Western civilization. And Gandhi answers, it would be a good idea. Yeah, you should work on it. You don't have one. Now you don't have a civilization. And when he says this, what he means is that when you have given absolute primacy to the material dimension of life and given very secondary or tertiary status, A, to how you attain those material results, B, what consequences, what externalities you create, but more important than anything else, that when you completely neglect the moral and ethical dimension, and say, okay, that is something that has to be done on the side. When the moral and ethical dimension is no longer the starting point of what you do, you have lost claims to being civilized. So this was the background. To cut a long story short, in this background, then I did many different kinds of work. I wrote one book on the activists and networks that I had been part of. That's called Bapu Kuti. Then I spent 10 years looking at the question of markets. And along the way, somewhere by about 2016, I became completely obsessed with just one question, that what is the story of nonviolence after Gandhi? And I asked this question to myself, even though I knew very well that nonviolence didn't begin with Gandhi. But it disturbed me that very well educated people believed that what is nonviolence in the 21st century? I mean, it's not even worth talking about. There's no such thing, which was shocking to me, because by then, even on a very, very superficial search, I knew that actually in the last 70 years, there have been enormous developments and advances in the practice of nonviolence. So I made a commitment that I would now, for an indefinite period, try to find out what is this story. And then I did the usual thing, I just kept pottering about, listening to people, reading things. And then I realized that, this is a topic which one can't take 10 years and then produce another book. In any case, I realized that none of the young people in my life were excited about another book. So I asked them, nieces, nephews, young friends, that, you know that I'm on this journey. In what way would you like to be updated on my search? They said it has to be audiovisual. And that is how the idea of Ahimsa Conversations was born. And to the credit of the techie world, and I wanted to note it that I'm praising them because I do so much complaining. Truly, YouTube is idiot proof. And, a person of my level of tech challenge, with just in very first day, maybe I remember somebody showed me, okay, this is what a YouTube channel is. Honestly, I didn't even know what a YouTube channel was. I just decided to do this. And then with somebody's help, I created the login and all that. And here we are, 116 episodes in 3 years.
Amazing.
And, looking forward to onward journey. But one last thing. The more important immediate motive. See, by 2020, it was very clear that this atmosphere of hatred and tension and conflict is not going to, tone down anytime soon. And I also realized that when you engage with someone on a specific issue, where you think something is wrong and they are saying, no, you don't understand, it's a matter of whatever, importance and pride or whatever, and what I am saying is wrong and what they are saying is right, I realized that sometimes there is no way to break this logjam on a specific issue. But it does open up some space if you say, okay, we can agree or disagree on, whether we should drive on the left or the right of the road. But that's what I mean by a specific issue. And I'm giving a completely absurd example because I don't want to go into any specific issue here just now. So I said that, look, whatever your position on a particular issue may be, can we separate that disagreement from violence, the issue of violence? Meaning, in a very rudimentary way, that you may want X outcome, but are you willing to kill people for it?
So are you trying to extract or abstract out the ethical dimension within a conflict? Or, removing the specificities?
No, I am not at all. I'm not trying. I'm very clear.
No, in sort of having that argument or continuing or trying to reach a synthesis Are you like in a specific issue, sort of trying to decouple those?
So, let me confess that I'm loud thinking here with you.
Hmm.
To some extent, yes. And I realize that this decoupling is very difficult to do on the ground.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
accept that.
Yeah.
And in many situations, you are not able to build enough of a space, where there is enough mutual trust that you can do kind of like a timeout.
Hmm.
In a sense, what I was doing was like in a match, you do, okay, one sec, can we have a, like a 10-minute timeout here and
Hmm.
park the dispute on one side and just think about uh, how do we de-stress ourselves? And see, there is absolutely no doubt that violence is stressful.
Well,
Hate is tiring. Love is re-energizing. And this is sometimes this is difficult to see because the adrenaline rush, which accompanies a lot of hate, can be confused for energy. And of course, there have been situations where it can be sustained, for a remarkable period. But uh, a remarkable period is still not on and on and on. It has some, I'll give you a specific example. I'll have to say it in Hindi, and if you like, we'll translate it later.
yeah.
A cousin of mine on a family dining table said one day, I don't care whatever you may say. I want to. I like that slogan. "Garv se kaho hum Hindu hain," which literally means say with pride, I'm a Hindu. I said, well, I have no problem with that, but I just want you to consider, just like a thought exercise. How about saying प्रेम से कहो हम हिंदू हैं? Let's say with love. I say with love that I'm a Hindu. And it did diffuse the acrimony. Now, it doesn't happen in every situation.
Correct.
And in this, maybe this is a good point to bring it in. I've been very influenced by Monica Sharma's work on transformational leadership. And she is also an Ahimsa Conversation. So
Okay.
you can look her up. She's one of the early ones, in fact. And in one sentence, what I learned from her has been so significant. She says, listen, first of all, deep listening. That's, the first thing that you have to attempt, at least, even if you don't succeed fully. And then she said, listen for the concern behind the complaint. Now,
Beautiful.
complaint is a term that covers many things. Your angst, your opposition, your whatever it is that you're against. Right?
Yeah.
Complaint is a term that is used to cover all of that. Listen for the concern. And I realized that, when I first heard this, it was like, I don't know, a ton of pennies dropped, not one penny, but many pennies dropped. Okay, I said, yes, of course. This is it. And, it was very healing for me because otherwise I spent at least 2 decades of my work life, just reacting against the person who was saying something that I found obnoxious. And not obnoxious because they like blue and I like red or something like that, but something that really violated what I consider to be a very elementary humane value. And so I spent a lot of time, just raving and ranting against that. But I think from about the mid-90s, slowly I began to struggle or strive to see what is really bothering this person. What is the source of their angst? And you know that there is mountains of now research, psychological research. For example, on serial killers, which is showing that there is some, deep wound, some deep humiliation in their past, usually in their childhood. Now, that is not a justification. But, sometimes an explanation can help us to navigate the rough parts of life better than we do otherwise. If we are completely at a loss for understanding why something is happening.
Yeah. So does it if I want to just take a little digression, that this deep rooted hatred or the conflict and the dispute and the match is happening, people, is it fair to say that, hey, that timeout is not even possible because of the ego? Or maybe if you want to just share your reflections about ego or self-respect, because when you say garv and prem, these are like very, very, there's a thin line. So any thoughts you have spent on that?
First is that maybe we should separate, for our purpose here in this discussion, let us separate our own everyday life from world events. Sometimes, I think we create confusion when we conflate the two. So, for example, why is this not working in the Ukraine conflict? That's a whole, there can be hours and hours of discussion on that. But that's very complicated. And as Akil Bilgrami has so importantly pointed out in an Ahimsa Conversation, Professor Akil Bilgrami, he teaches philosophy at Columbia in New York. He says, don't confuse peace with nonviolence. Peace is a matter of negotiation. Nonviolence is non-negotiable. It's a matter of fundamental ethics. Okay, so I'm just clarifying that let's not confuse peace and nonviolence. Now, if we limit ourselves to the everyday life functions, because I think that is more helpful for this exercise, since, I'm certainly not qualified to comment on how the geopolitical struggles can take a different turn. So, ego is a term that's used too loosely sometimes. Let us say that what I perceive to be happening, I'm no expert on this, is that just as we are attached to a view of ourselves, see, we all have a certain view of ourselves, right? And I don't know actually how much psychologists differentiate that from ego. And I'm much more comfortable actually with the Indian framing, the Indic framing, the sense of ahem, self, is very important. Okay. After all, without that, there will be no individuation. And without individuation, how can I be part of a collective if there is no I? So all those are elementary things. I think maybe the tension and the stress begins because we are so narrowly attached to the sense of perception, both of how we perceive ourselves and how we perceive the other. That we are not able to, have a bird's eye view of the situation.
Can I share one small story which I heard in one of
Please,
the
please.
so I think it will be somewhere online, but I'm fascinated the way SN Goenka, who has brought in Vipassana into India, he shared this story in the 10-day course, and he explains the situation. It will take some time, but it's very interesting. So
No, no.
there's this a person who's sitting on the road, probably somewhere on the road, and you are walking by, and it's quite not well lit, so you can't really identify that person, and you're walking and you happen to bump into his leg, so his leg touches your leg or whatever, like he just stumbles upon the person, and this just two people there, and the person sitting on the floor says, "Dikhta nahi hai kya andhe," which is like, can't you see, are you blind? So he's almost like a derogatory sense, he blames this person, and this guy says, "Ha ha, theek hai, sorry," and he walks away. Now exactly the same situation, where this person who's walking is also walking with two of his friends, and exactly the same situation happens and same reaction, but this time this person says, like, "You should have sat properly, na, you could sit properly." So they get into a little argument, saying that, like, who am I, like, why are you sort of pointing me that I'd made a mistake? And then the third situation, exactly the same thing happens. This is one guy, same just one person, but he could identify him to be his son. Like, assume that this person is his son who's sitting on the floor, and then his anger is slightly heightened. He says, "ऐसे बोलते हैं बाप को," like whatever, like, "Don't you know how to talk to your father also?" And then he
So
grumbles.
expectations have kicked in.
Yeah. And then the fourth situation, which is the last, is that there are two people. So again, the same group is there, and everyone knows that the person sitting on the floor is his son. Now it completely changes the dynamics. So he explains all four situations, four same reactions, same actions, but the reactions and the drama which unfolds there is quite different. And that's why I said ego, in a sense that
Yeah.
you make an image of yourself, and you also make an image of how you are in other person as well. Like, I am like this, you try to put that image in the मतलब सामने के person may you
Yeah.
try and put in that. Yeah. So I found this to be related, like what you're talking to
This
this.
is, I must say, I don't remember this story. Is it in the 10-day course?
Yes,
But
yes.
he must have used different stories at different times.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
no, really, I mean, I think we should take a moment to, honor the memory of Goenka ji. And, what a phenomenal life and contribution.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think this is a very helpful illustration. Uh,
Hmm.
and what it also highlights, of course, here the emphasis is on the how behavior changes depending on the unknownness or the relational connection between the two people and the presence of others who are whatever witnesses or watching the situation. But the other factor that it is highlighting for me is what the Buddhists call, they have a word for it. I can't remember the term. Basically, that we all have so many different selves,
Hmm. Hmm.
which arise
Yeah.
at different moments. And the really fascinating thing is that we've all experienced moments of flash of anger
Hmm.
followed by immediate regret. So there's like a spike of anger, and then you feel, oh my gosh, why did I say that? Or why did I overreact? So this arising feature, I think, is so important in everyday life. If we can hang on to this awareness,
Hmm.
then maybe we can be kinder both to ourselves and to others around us.
Hmm.
No,
Yeah.
because then it highlights that nobody is permanently the same.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, there's a continuity. Of course, there's a kind of a broad and familiar pattern within which most lives and most people unfold and unflower, or not unflower, sorry, unfold and flower and bloom. See, Gandhi's own life, which in fact today, these days, people who want to denigrate him are getting so much masala because of that. But that's, I mean, I think those moments of his failures, his spikes of negative, what the Buddhists so helpfully call afflictive emotions, they make him more real,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know.
Very true.
And in
Very
fact,
true.
yeah, in the Gandhi film, the Attenborough film, I've always been very grateful that, he included that scene where Gandhi loses his temper when Kasturba refuses to clean the latrines.
Hmm. Oh, I
You
don't
remember?
recollect the movie. Yeah.
Okay. So it's worth watching. It's in the period when they're living in South Africa.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think the greatest contribution, of the rediscovery or the reintroduction of Vipassana is also that it's primarily helping us to be at peace with ourselves.
Hmm.
See, we know, I mean, from just common empirical evidence around us, that it is when we are not at peace with ourselves that we make trouble with other people.
Hmm. Hmm. It's a yeah, long self struggle, and that was my actually second question. We are digressing, but I'm enjoying the overall flow of it. Is that in Vipassana, or as you mentioned before the recording, also about the athletes who are sort of trying to push their boundaries, they are also in a so if we can like take us little digression, that violence with yourself, is it advisable to push your limits, or is it even called violence? I don't know, because as per the first
Yeah,
definition when you started, it's
yeah,
kind of not matching
yeah.
up.
So, I think first and foremost that we are not going to get any definitive answer on this.
That's
Why?
completely
Because
fine.
I think it's always going to be very, very subjective.
Hmm.
Um, so let us just as an exercise, the first clarification we must put on the table is that the person is fully in charge of the choice they are making. Number one. See that, right? That's elementary. So, meaning that there is no external pressure, coercion, or anything.
Hmm.
Okay. That a person truly, and an adult,
Hmm.
okay, so somebody who whatever, by convention, we grant that, okay, now you are old enough to make your own decisions.
Hmm.
Then, in that frame of a person fully in command of their life, I mean, who is fully in command of their life, but you know what I mean,
Hmm. Hmm.
who is
Yeah.
reasonably, who is not under any overt or covert pressure and coercion, this person, it is very difficult to know when you are pushing your limits and when you are doing violence to yourself.
Hmm.
I think it's only a process of self discovery,
Hmm.
because self indulgence is also a kind of violence only, na?
Hmm. Hmm.
We know that there are some people fall into a trap of emotionally self indulging.
Hmm.
Self indulgence can be many things. It can be self pity. It can be
Yeah, to a certain extent, almost like a narcissist kind of.
correct. That's one version of it.
Hmm. Hmm.
So really, I think only the individual can for themselves take the call, and ideally, in an ideal situation, the individual is not a lone individual. If
Hmm.
that I feel that a person who is connected with, is embedded in some kind of wholesome community, will be able to navigate these shoals. Which means friends, family, colleagues, comrades, fellow travelers, who will both admire what you're trying to do and yet, call you out and say, now stop it. You're starving yourself or you're going to give yourself a heart attack if you do any more running or whatever. So many ways in which, people push themselves. The other one thing, and now I don't know how if I can say this in a way that will land coherently. I think one good litmus test when we are pushing our limits is to check if we are becoming arrogant. Because the one thing that I've seen, and it happens with austerity, I've seen this, people with a great capacity. This is not a generic statement. I'm not saying this always happens. But the kind of, if the austerity is very much a self-control thing, then sometimes, it creates a kind of, maybe arrogance is too harsh a word, but kind of pride it can
Yeah, I know what you mean. I know what you mean. Exactly. In fact, I'm going through that phase in my life because I remember recently I interviewed Dr. Keshav Chaitanya Kunthe. He's a musicologist and a harmonium player. And to which I told him, I asked him, in fact, after the interview, I was in this conflict because I've been reading a bit of Vivekanand where he said that in the West when he traveled, and he said there are too many rules, and too many rules is a sign of death, which is a very, very powerful statement. And I was kind of confused and said, even monastery is full of rules, then how is he saying this? And to which Dr. Kunte nicely explained that when you enforce rules on others, it could be death, but on yourself, it's kind of austerity. It's much more peaceful. So I made peace with that answer so far.
No, I think that's I would agree with him. And what I'm hearing him say is that we must distinguish between constraint and restraint, between an external constraint and a self-restraint. Self-restraint, when it is done without, which is when it's done very organically, is very empowering. It's very strengthening. But again, he obviously, sorry, go ahead.
No. So can you sort of give any example from Gandhi's life, because I see a lot of restraint, right? Self-restraint.
But the most famous example would be his fasting, which is even today causing so much controversy. And again, I can refer to one Ahimsa conversation in which Nandini Oza, who is an oral archivist of the Narmada movement, Narmada Bachao movement, she talks about this. She has really delved into this issue quite a lot. And of course, that the whole Ambedkar-Gandhi conflict hinges on this. That Gandhi is fasting as a method, vis-a-vis the negotiations with Ambedkar on the representation issue, was a form of violence. So that's the political side of it. It's very difficult. Why go to Gandhi? See, I've been an admirer and a friend, and in some small way, fellow traveler of Medha Patkar. And I can tell you that we all used to feel so conflicted with her fasts. Because the first thing is you feel guilty. Because she's on day 10. She's on day 10. And you're in awe of how she's still together. She's not, collapsing. And what an amazing miracle that is. By fasting here, we mean only, usually, I think it was just water with a little bit of salt. Because of India, it's very hot. So, because the objective is not to die.
Yeah, yeah.
So, one would admire her. And yet there was this, it's almost like you can feel how much her body must be protesting.
Mm.
So I don't know if this answers your question, Kedar. I think, have we deviated from where we were? Because
No,
I'm only sharing, what I've
yeah.
the difficulty, and it was not my personal difficulty. This was the experience of, all the non-fasting people
Mm.
in that group. And yet one can't disagree with what she's doing also, because none of these were, these were not fasts on whim. This is not, these were all very carefully reasoned issues which she was trying to highlight
Mm.
through the the fasting.
Mm. If it was done on whim, it wouldn't have lasted also. I mean, there has to be a deep, profound. I mean, otherwise it will be madness, right? It will be,
No, I mean,
uh,
see,
or there have been instances where it was just on a whim and still people could pull it
by
off.
whim, I mean, see, in a family context, there can be a person who will torture themselves as a kind of a tantrum.
Hmm. I was talking about like bigger social issues, but yeah, I got.
Ha, 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 ha. Yeah. I don't know. It all depends on also the individual's capacity to,
Mm.
it's also a physiological thing. Some people have a greater capacity uh, to deprive their body of food and water than other people. There's no single standard. But I
Mm.
think that's not the issue here. That's not what we are struggling with. I think what we are really struggling with here is that even if you say that I'm not fasting as a form of coercion vis-a-vis my opponent, whether the opponent is a government or some opposing idea or whatever, is it not still a coercion? Maybe. I must say that I have not come to any conclusion myself on
Hmm.
this.
It's yeah. It's
Except a
like
very,
no. Go ahead.
G, go ahead.
No. Go
Okay.
ahead. Go ahead.
No, just that I'm saying, except that what is very clear is that there is no comparison between, if at all this is coercion, there's no comparison between this coercion and holding a gun to somebody's head.
Hmm. Yeah.
At least
Yeah.
in my mind, I could, I could, maybe somebody could out argue me on that.
No, I know where. Like, yeah. I think I can guess that it's many layered, and as you keep unpeeling the layers, there are some deeper layers which are either conflicting or then contradicting, and then you are continuously exploring that. So maybe I'll just change the track a bit more. Is that which is much more real and maybe not that philosophical? Is that how do you respond to, say, criticism that non-violence is ineffective or very idealistic, right? In the face of oppression or violence that is happening. Maybe
Yeah.
one example or at a meta level also.
No, let's look at the data. There's data on this.
Hmm.
And so first, let's look at political conflict, right? That's what mainly I think your attention was on that.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's a study by Erica Chenoweth and what is the other lady's name? It'll come to me in a minute. I have it here somewhere. They did a study of political struggles throughout the 20th century.
Hmm.
And a large majority of the successful struggles are nonviolent.
Amazing.
And they were more often successful. By successful only means that, they either managed to overthrow the regime and or they got fulfilled some of the demands for which those movements were happening. And two basic reasons. One, that it is far more people can get involved. Okay. And there's a much better chance that the change, when it comes, will be creative. Whereas change by the power of the gun often doesn't bring, it may bring a change of regime, but it often doesn't bring transformation. What this study doesn't, I think, include, I can't remember now, but we know this from our own experience, that the question that I ask to most people who say this about the ineffectiveness of nonviolent struggles is, can we first please make a list of the violent struggles that have just gone on and on and on without attaining their objective? Let's make a list of that first. So, at this level, this question is easy to tackle. The difficult one is, say, World War II. What would you do? What could have been done? Was there a non-violent way to defeat Hitler? I don't think even Gandhi feels that. And here, I think we need to go back to certain fundamentals. And again, I emphasize here that I am loud thinking. This is part of my ongoing exploration. Please don't take what I'm saying as some kind of definitive, statement.
Yeah.
That I would refer to Srivats Goswami ji. He is also he says this in his Ahimsa Conversation, that it is not non-violence when it is based on fear.
It is not non-violence.
Yeah. If you're taking an action based on fear and calling it non-violence, that is a travesty.
Yeah, it's an escape. Yeah.
Yeah. So that means that actually you cannot be truly non-violent unless you have the ability to fight. And here then, of course, now we enter into a very complicated ground. But maybe, so there's a story in the Mahabharata where two evenly matched warriors are in a combat. I can't remember what weapon they're using, but they're in a one-to-one combat. And finally, one of them falls to the ground and the other one is about to strike the fatal blow when he sees fear in that man's eye. And he pulls back. He says, wow. Now I can't kill you. Why? Because he said, you are a Kshatriya. You are not allowed to experience fear in the moment of death. Your fear has made me angry. If I now kill you in a moment of anger, that will be a paap, a sin. Get up. We will start again. We will fight again. And may the best man win.
Wow. So beautiful.
So, it's not, violence and non-violence are not a binary divide. That much I'm clear. Few things I'm clear about, but this much I can say with confidence. It's not it's a spectrum. It's like it's like an energy that's in perpetual flux.
It's a different dimension to see at it. In fact, I remember one more story which I was listening to one podcast on Vedanta by Swami Sarvapriyananda from, I think, Southern California. And he narrated one story that there was this like really high-end Kung Fu master or Tai Chi master, like really high-end, like he was the best at what he did. And he was walking on the road one day and there was one guy who comes in and like shows him a knife and says that give me all your money, and he simply gives away everything that he has. And then everyone asked that, why didn't you fight? You are the best. And he said, how can I use these hands on this beautiful man? Like, it shows power, right? It shows, like, I mean, these hands are not to like destroy somebody, or like it opens up a new way of looking at things.
Bilkul. See, and also that, and this is an idea that is there across cultures, that the stronger you are physically or in any other way, in terms of power structure and mental power, even moral power, the greater responsibility you carry.
Yeah.
And this is a very difficult thing to say sometimes, because these days we are automatically suspicious of anything, that describes a kind of hierarchy. But I don't think that our discomfort with hierarchy in contemporary times doesn't alter the significance of this, that to those to whom more is given, more is asked. See, if you look at the Arthashastra, for example, which is written by Kautilya, who's a contemporary of Aristotle, though they don't, I think, know of each other's existence, as far as I know. Of course, it's a caste-based system, etc. And there are different duties and different obligations ascribed to different castes. But non-violence is common across the spectrum. And so what I'm hoping to do through this journey of mine is to have a finer and finer understanding that what in that context did non-violence mean. And I think that story from the Mahabharata is one illustration, though it's only one small illustration. The other is, how to say this? See, duties and obligations in a ideal world can be very organically interwoven. Duties and rights. Sorry, I don't mean duties and obligations is not what I meant. Duties and rights. And it's a very complicated thing today. How to navigate this space. But I have a feeling that is going to be a very major dimension of how we seek to explore nonviolence in everyday life.
In fact, rights is very, very far away for me to investigate. In fact, even if we stick to duties, what are duties, right? I mean, that itself could be a journey of its own.
Bilkul. And is it, the first question that comes up is that are duties something that is dictated to you externally? Or is it that which you discover for yourself? Dekho ji, let's look at something very basic. For example, care of aged parents.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a whole, there's a massive force of history, culture, morality that has messaged you that you must look after aging parents. But in the end, it's only a process of self-discovery. The book can say what it wants. But in real life, every person has to discover that duty within themselves. Otherwise, it's an imposition.
Yeah. So do you see non-violence again as a process of discovery?
Yeah.
As in self-discovery. Because, yes.
It has to be. And otherwise, it will become, a workbook.
But I'm sure there must be something which is practically applicable, right? And that's where the beauty of beauty of leaders like Gandhi would come into play, right? He practiced, but he somehow influenced also.
Of course.
So if it's self-discovery, how can one be influenced?
No, but no, but we are influenced because we are fascinated by the many layers of his self-discovery. I think that is the crux of it.
Okay.
So, there's a very interesting incident that happens a few days before the assassination. In the evening prayer meeting itself, one man gets up. I mean, this is just 2-3 days before. I've used this story. I mean, I've shared this story in a lecture I gave, but I'm very bad with remembering dates. Anyway, this man who's in the audience, it was an open house. Can you believe that? The world knew that there are people trying to kill Gandhi, but anybody could come to this prayer meeting. He refused to restrict entry. Okay, so this man gets up and says, I object to your having a Muslim prayer in your prayer meeting. Because everybody knew that it was a multi-faith prayer meeting. Every major world religion was represented in that multi-faith prayer meeting. So this one man gets up, makes this objection, and the bulk of the gathering objects to him, right? Because the bulk of the people who are gathered there share Gandhiji's perspective. Correct?
Yeah.
They have come for the multi-faith meeting. So they are upset with the objector. Now Gandhi is more upset with their reaction.
Wow.
He's more upset with their reaction, and of course he's also upset with. But the thing is, he knew about the objector, right? It was not maybe the first time that this happened. Every day he was getting sacks full of letters from people who hated him. Most of the letters were saying, why don't you drop dead? We'll be better off as a people, as a country, as a religion. That's the kind of mail he was getting. So he said, okay, today we will not have the prayer as a kind of penance.
As in no player or just not the Muslim player?
I think he called off the thing because he said, there's no point.
Wow.
He's wrong, but so are we, in shouting him down like this. And then the next day, the man comes back. I think he comes back. And Gandhi says, look, you know that this is a multi-faith prayer meeting. When you come here and you object in that space, you are being unfair to those who have come for the multi-faith prayer meeting. And so we will proceed with our faith. I will not withdraw the Muslim prayer, no matter how many people tell me to. And if you feel that this is wrong, I welcome you to come and talk to me privately. But do not disrupt. It is not appropriate to disrupt the public and the group gathering of people who have come specially because they are committed to the multi-faith prayer meeting.
Very, very powerful person. Like what? Yeah, I'm just fascinated with the kind of people who are just change their entire worldview by understand or trying to understand Gandhiji, from Vinoba Bhave to Medha Patkar. Like it's just amazing power.
Yeah, it is. And I think we are very blessed, to have the opportunity, literally, to dip our feet and our hands in this flowing river.
Yeah.
Actually, that's also a very helpful metaphor. You know how we say that you can never put your hand in the same river ever. कहते हैं ना?
Correct.
It's always different water. Every second, every minute, it is different water. So in one sense, the idea that it's the same river is notional. There is some water. Okay, that some water is always there. So that
Maybe,
process of discovery. Yeah, go ahead.
no, maybe it's just a direction, or as they say that there's a current of flow, right? There's a current
Correct.
which is flowing through,
That
and
is
maybe
correct.
you.
Correct. वो तो है.
Hmm.
And for us, that very visible continuity, uh, accepting and recognizing that is very important, no, to our having a steady grasp of the world.
Hmm.
See, now astronomy is telling us, right, that some star that we take for granted may have actually collapsed, but we won't know for a million years or whatever, because
Yeah.
the light we are seeing today
Hmm.
left from there a million years ago.
Yeah, I know. It's like, yeah, I can sort of relate to the kind of journey that you are onto with this, because it's just ever fascinating, I would say. But just to conclude this conversation, right, I wanted to ask you that, like, what do you see as a long term future of ahimsa as a concept? Like, is there, given the current setup, definitely it's a very much required thing, but in a
Yeah.
long run, maybe 100 years out, or is it too
So,
weak to guess that
I
far?
find that because you mentioned 100 years, I should mention that I asked around a while back to some youngsters in my life who read a lot of science fiction. Okay, bhai, is there any utopian science fiction? With some positive, hopeful view of the distant future.
Wow. Hmm.
And they said no, actually, and they had not thought of it. Otherwise, they said no, that's interesting. Most of what we read is very dystopian. So, ek to
Hmm.
ye hai that I'm just putting that as a factoid, and I hope that somebody will listen to this and send me news about the hopeful science fiction, because I would love
Hmm.
to know about that. I have been a big fan of Star Trek.
Hmm.
Um, if you know about the American series, the original one made in the 60s. And now that original series was actually a very interesting exploration because it, I mean, the ships have lasers that can, destroy entire fleets and all that. But the whole world of that serial, the imagined world, is premised on the created history that human beings learned to conquer their violent impulse. It
Oh,
took
okay.
it took the Third World War,
Hmm.
etc. And so, anyway, I just brought that in as an aside. I don't want to engage with this question through science fiction necessarily. Um, so it's important here to mention that Gandhiji's view is very clear, and kind of very rudimentary also, that we will either learn to make non-violence central to our actions in the world, or we will perish. He's very clear. And um, 2 years ago, I wrote an essay, which was a lecture actually, um, which to the Indian Academy of Science, in which I looked at how Gandhi and Oppenheimer, the father of the atom bomb, how they
Mhm.
both, how surprisingly, they have a common ground at one level on the atom bomb.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
So, see, Oppenheimer by history as a person was a pacifist.
Hmm.
Okay. But this is the work he does. And he gets assigned to head this project. And it's a very agonizing exercise by which he comes to the conclusion that the world simply cannot afford, the human species cannot afford the risk of the Nazis splitting the atom before the Allies.
Hmm.
that the whole future of the human species may hinge on this. So he, works non-stop for what is it, almost 4 years. And they create the bomb. And then from the moment that the test is done, he starts lobbying for it not to be used. Though he knows that, and he's heartbroken, he's very disgusted when the Americans decide to use it the way they did, because there was no need. Anyway, all that is complicated. The Oppenheimer story at that phase is complicated. Suffice to say that after the war, Oppenheimer becomes the leading campaigner for the abolition of nuclear weapons, which causes him to be witch hunted by McCarthy in the 50s. You must be a commie. If you are lobbying against nuclear weapons, you must be a communist, is the allegation. I mean, his brother was a member of the Communist Party. That was also used against him. And he was stripped of his security clearance. Okay. Which is only restored a year or two before he dies by Kennedy. Okay. So I was saying that on the day he was assassinated, or either the day before that, Margaret Brooke White, the famous photographer for Time magazine, came to meet Gandhi. And she asked him, just now, if the bomb was falling, what would you do? The atom bomb. He said, I won't go to the shelter. What's the point? I would rather stand outside, look up and pray for the pilot. So, I'm telling you all these stories because actually I don't have a simple and straight answer to your question. Or at least my answer may be very boring for you, which is that I don't know how things will go. I don't know yet. But I don't need to know also. Because what is worth doing is worth doing regardless of the outcome.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm really leaning heavily on the power that I get from that which I don't know. Money in the sense, KP, I don't know where just now some star is, turning into a black hole. And how that may affect the dynamic of this complicated universe. So I'm taking it absolutely to the, outer reaches of the galaxy. And then I'll come and then I'll zero in completely to our present. And I don't know tomorrow what somebody will say or do, which will have a ripple effect on millions of lives in this country. I don't know. And therefore, and I do know that it is utterly futile for me to just be frustrated with this, not knowing. So you have to just keep alive those ideas, values, and hopes, for which we have proof that they have brought us this far.
Yeah. Is there a very huge component of sacrifice in non-violence?
Yes, but I don't think it's more than that of a soldier who is equipped and trained to go out and kill. That actually is interesting. I brought that also out. I wanted to share with you. This is a quotation from a man who has been a trainer for the American Army. His name is Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman. He's the author of On Killing, the psychological cost of learning to kill in war and society. He says there can be no doubt that this resistance to killing one's fellow man is there, and that it exists as a result of a powerful combination of instinctive, rational, environmental, hereditary, cultural, and social factors. It is there, it is strong, and it gives us cause to believe that there just may be hope for mankind after all. And he's saying this on the basis of lived experience as a trainer, and this is now known about armies across the world that
Hmm.
it is a huge task. They have to work very hard to break down people's natural resistance to killing. Yeah, this, I'm not saying there aren't people who have some psychopathic tendency, but that's not the average person.
Hmm.
So, if yes, of course, there is sacrifice involved, but I'm not sure it's more sacrifice, than the soldier who is sent out in this charge in which there is like a 2% chance that he or she will come back alive.
No, what I meant
Yeah,
when in sorry,
yeah,
what I
go ahead.
meant what I meant in the sacrifice sense is that, as you said, that you don't know, and still it's almost वही कर्म करो फल की इच्छा मत करो वाला angle में you keep doing, you keep discovering or uncovering different facets of non-violence without I don't know, without it's a crude way to say, without hoping that it will be implemented in everyone's thought, or I don't know, I'm not able to frame myself correctly, but
No, without caring. What you're saying is, are you being indifferent to the outcomes? Is that what you're
hmm,
asking?
not really,
No.
not really. What I meant
Huh.
is that when you shared this story that Gandhi was praying for, like he would have prayed for the soldier, who or the pilot, to stick on to this whole idea of non-violence, or have a firm conviction in it. It needs that restraint, and then that's why there is a lot of sacrifice, where you are almost letting go of yourself completely.
And in its highest form, yes,
Hmm.
perhaps. But as I said, it's a sliding scale. That's
Hmm.
not the only place you can live.
Hmm.
I like to sing. I'm never going to be a Suniti Chauhan or a Lata Mangeshkar. But that doesn't stop me from and my friends from enjoying whatever level of singing that I do.
Beautiful.
You, Hannah. So I'm
Yeah.
saying that in this also there is that spectrum, and I don't want to at all imply that uh, it's okay to be on a treadmill. See, there was a film in India some years back. I think that has given us a very good metaphor. Lage raho munna bhai.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay, now that lage raho to me is a dynamic state. And the crux of that dynamism perhaps is that I, I refuse to get frustrated with what is not achieved.
Hmm.
That doesn't mean that I'm smug about what is not achieved. To
Yeah.
be able to continue to refine the struggle without, bitterness. Actually, that may be the most crucial requirement.
Hmm.
Because the actual, maybe worst enemy of ahimsa is bitterness. And you will
Hmm.
find if you look even on the surface, you can see it. That the crux of the the generation of hate and envy and violence or violent conflict, that entire narrative is based on bitterness
Hmm.
and resentment.
Yeah. At a very trivial level, you see that in those fights which happen at WhatsApp forwards, right? You sort of try to switch off after some time, because somewhere you are engaging in a dialogue which is landing up in bitterness. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, in a sense, what I'm saying is that if you can keep the struggle alive inside you and around you without feeling embittered,
Hmm.
then that energy itself, hopefully, will keep refining and recalibrating. And see, this is not only about individuals. When I say all these things, actually, of course, at the root of it all, it's, what do you do yourself? But one should also not feel that any of this is really possible without collectives. So the collective persists, and the collective is not necessarily an organization.
Yeah.
From 1857 to 1947, there's no organizational continuity. It's an idea.
Yeah.
It's an aspiration for which, in retrospect, you can see a linking thread.
Amazing.
So I'm saying let's have confidence in those invisible linking threads, but that are not visible to us now.
Now, yeah.
That's
But
all. They are not actually invisible.
Yeah. But they are inside. They are continuously. They are just not maybe manifested, but it is an underlying.
Or not manifest in a form that we are able to grasp.
Maybe yes.
Why the sound waves always existed in the whole journey of the whole evolution of this planet and the physics of the cosmos. Sound waves were always there, right? And if anybody had told you that, say in 500 AD or in even 1700 AD, anywhere in the world, that there would one day be devices with that, firstly, that there are sound waves and that human beings will find a way to tap them. Would we have believed it? No. But they were there, no? They were manifest even. We just couldn't, manipulate them. We couldn't tap them to our purpose. And here we are today, having this conversation.
Yeah, it's so satisfying to see this from this perspective. There's a lot of hope there.
So in a sense, maybe this is a good point on which to wrap up.
Yeah.
That so the radio waves thing illustrates what I'm saying about the resources are already there. It's a question of unpredictable or at the moment unknown energy, people and circumstances, making them more manifest. Of course, it won't happen on its own. Lots of people experimented, right, before we got the radio, a transistor, sorry. So the same will happen, is happening already. That's why so many people across the world experimenting, struggling. There's a whole movement, of struggling for creating departments of peace in governments across the world. What about that?
Cool. I think we can probably end on one quote which I think Gandhi famously said, "An eye for an eye makes the whole world blind." And I think that's a very positive thing that we can take away and think about it, that Ahimsa can be discovered in many ways within yourself and then transpiring it to other people around. Rajni, it was just amazing talking to you. Thanks a lot for giving your time.
Kedar. It was
great
really
privilege.
A pleasure and an honor to be here with you on this show. And thank you again so much for including me. Pleasure talking to you.
Okay. Thanks a lot. That's it. And that's it from today's Gyan session. For show notes and more Gyan, visit audiogyan.com. And if you wish to connect with me, I am at Audiogyan Moments on Instagram. Until then, take care.